Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. Today, we're really focusing in, immersing ourselves in just one session of the Law of One Material, Session 68. We're using the sources you've provided, and our goal really is to unpack the insights here about consciousness, protection, and what service truly means.
Absolutely. Session 68 is, well, it's quite revealing, isn't it? It gives you this really close look at the dynamics of the communication itself, not just the big metaphysical ideas, but the practicalities, the energy involved between the instrument, the questioner, and Ra.
Exactly, and it's great to be exploring this with you. So Session 68 kicks off, and Ra immediately flags something significant. They state the instrument's physical energy is, and this is the quote, depleted completely.
Which is quite a stark opening.
It really is. And then there's this mention of an unusual event during a group meeting. So right away, you kind of feel this sense of vulnerability, which makes everything that follows feel even more, well, critical.
That depleted completely line.
Yeah, it really hits home, doesn't it? It underscores the sheer energetic cost of doing this work.
Mm.
And then Ra says, the remainder is as previously stated.
What do you think that remainder is?
Well, that's the intriguing part, isn't it? It suggests that even though the physical energy is gone, something else, maybe the vital energy, the spiritual connection, is still intact. It makes you wonder, what is that remainder exactly? How does it even allow the contact to continue?
It's a fascinating starting point, and it leads right into the next question. 68.2, where Don, the questioner, is understandably worried about even continuing the session.
Right, you can really sense his concern for Carla, the instrument. It shows a lot of care. And Ra's answer here is pivotal. They explain the session can only happen because of transferred energy.
Transferred energy.
From who? From two other members of the group, given willingly as an act of service. So right there, you see this incredibly clear example of how conscious service, positive intention, can literally provide energetic fuel. It's a powerful illustration of interconnectedness. Wow. So it's like a direct energy donation, basically. And Ra warns them, don't try this without that transfer, even if the instrument has the willpower.
Precisely. Even with the strongest will to serve, pushing beyond those physical limits without support could deplete vital energy, not just physical. It's a real caution about respecting limitations, even in service.
That makes sense. It's about balance.
It is. And Ra clarifies this deep exhaustion isn't just from, immediate pain or discomfort. It's the cumulative effect of the ongoing contact, the long-term channeling. They call it the continual experience of this distortion.
Distortion meaning the stepping down of higher density energy.
Exactly. Adapting that raw consciousness into something communicable in our density takes a toll over time. It's not a light switch you just slip on and off without consequence.
Right. It really puts the whole process into a different light. So question 68.3 then naturally asks about giving the instrument a longer rest period.
And Ra's response here is just classic law of one, isn't it? It pivots right back to free will, the first distortion. They don't prescribe a schedule.
No. What do they suggest?
They guide the group to observe the instrument, to use their own discernment, and make the decision together. It shows such respect for their autonomy, even while offering guidance.
That is interesting. It's not a top-down instruction.
Not at all. And there's this moment, quite touching really, where Ra acknowledges a previous suggestion they made about scheduling didn't fully grasp the instrument's fragility. They actually ask for forgiveness.
Ra asks for forgiveness.
Yes, it shows this incredible responsiveness, this willingness to learn and adjust based on the reality of the situation. It feels like a true partnership.
That's quite something. So the current advice is basically be flexible, watch carefully, and decide as a group.
Exactly. It's about balancing the instrument's well-being, which is essential for the work, with the group's collective desire to continue that work. Ra calls it a fine line, acknowledging the difficulty. And again, they state they can't be more precise because that would infringe on free will.
Free will is just paramount, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get to questions 4 and 5, 68.4, 68.5. And this seems to be the main event that triggered these concerns, this incident, during a regular group meeting.
Yes, this is where the session really dives into some complex energetic territory. You get a peek behind the curtain, so to speak, at what can happen during altered states. The questioner, Don, was absent, and he's asking about Carla entering a trance state unexpectedly during just a normal meeting.
Just spontaneously.
Apparently so, and Ra confirms, yes, they can shed light on this.
Okay, so what happened?
According to Ra, Carla was actually channeling another entity at first, Latwi, who Ra identifies as fifth density, focused on wisdom. Someone asked a question specifically about the raw material.
Oh, okay.
And in that moment, Carla apparently had a fleeting thought, a wish that she were channeling Ra instead of Latwi to answer that question.
Just a thought.
Just a thought. But that shift in focus, that subtle desire, created an energetic opening, like a change in her vibrational signal.
And that attracted something.
It attracted the attention of a negatively oriented Orion entity. Ra says this entity was trying to be of service in its own way, meaning, from a negative perspective, seeking to manipulate or control.
Wow. So Carla starts mentally preparing for eye contact, thinking about it.
And that very preparation widened the opening for this Orion entity. But thankfully, Latwi, the fifth density being already connected, intervened. Latwi basically acted as a gatekeeper. Ra highlights two crucial things. First, Latwi's fifth density vibration was naturally higher and more capable of handling the Orion entity's frequency than, say, a third density being would be.
Yeah, a vibrational advantage.
Right. And second, the energetic support from the other group members present was vital. Their combined positive energy helped stabilize Carla's energy field.
So the group helped, even passively.
Actively, energetically. Ra explains Latwi managed to maintain the connection to Carla's mind-body-spirit complex, even as she apparently came very close to slipping out of her physical body altogether. Latwi kept the Orion entity from seizing control and eventually helped reintegrate Carla.
Goodness. That sounds incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
Ra uses the phrase, came perilously close to breaking the way of confusion, which sounds serious.
It implies a near violation of free will, potentially influencing Carla against her inherent orientation. It really underscores the risks.
Which leads right into question 6, 68.6. What exactly was this Orion entity trying to do? What was its plan?
This part is quite chilling, but important for you to understand the negative path's mechanics. Ra says the plan was to essentially grab Carla's mind-body-spirit complex while it was separated from the physical during that trance state.
Grab it and take it where?
To the negative portions of time-space.
Yeah.
Effectively removing her consciousness from her body.
Leaving the body.
Vulnerable. An unknowing entity, Ra calls it, susceptible to manipulation, which could lead to coma and eventually physical death.
That's horrific. But what about Carla's consciousness, her spirit?
That's the next part of the plan. Her higher self would then face a terrible choice. Either leave the mind-body-spirit complex stuck indefinitely in that negative time-space, or allow it to incarnate into negatively polarized space-time. But, and this is key, it would be as a negatively polarized entity without having gone through the natural process of developing that polarity through choices over lifetimes.
So like being forced onto the negative path.
Essentially, yes. A shortcut that bypasses free will development. Ross says this would result in an entity facing a very long, difficult journey back towards the creator under conditions not of its own making. It highlights the manipulative aspect of the negative path, seeking control and harvest over genuine choice.
That's a profound level of interference. Okay, question 7, 68.7, digs into that choice the higher self has. Don seems to think the higher self will be forced into the negative incarnation.
Right, that's his initial understanding. But Ra corrects him. They clarify the higher self could theoretically choose to just leave the consciousness stranded in negative time-space forever.
But they probably wouldn't.
Highly unlikely, Ra says, because the fundamental drive of that higher self, of all consciousness really, is towards experience, towards learning, towards knowing the creator by interacting with other selves.
So leaving it stranded goes against that core impulse.
Exactly. And there's another critical reason. Ra explains that a highly positive entity in negative time-space creates a kind of barrier due to the complete lack of likeness or resonance. Think of magnets repelling.
Ah, like oil and water.
Precisely. The positive entity would experience only darkness, a total void, because there's nothing there for it to connect with or learn from in a way that aligns with its nature. It's an unbearable state for something oriented towards love and light.
So that incompatibility makes staying there untenable. Okay. Then, question 8, 68.8, just asks for clarification. Is that darkness experienced in negative space-time or negative time-space?
And Ra's answer is concise. Negative time-space. It emphasizes the non-physical temporal aspect of that particular negative realm.
Got it. Now, questions 9 and 10 explore what density level that forced negative incarnation might happen at. First, Don asks, using Carla, the instrument, as the example.
And Ra immediately refuses to answer.
Why?
Violation of the first distortion free will again. Speculating on Carla's specific potential future path would interfere with her choices. Ra is incredibly consistent on this.
Okay, makes sense. So Dawn rephrases the question in 68.10, using a hypothetical sixth density wanderer as an example instead.
And that Ra can answer. In principle, they confirm the assumption. Yes, the strength of polarization would be matched as closely as possible. A sixth density positive being forced into negative incarnation would likely end up in a sixth density negative environment if available.
If available.
Yeah, RAP has this interesting caveat. They mention there might be an incompleteness or scarcity of sufficiently strong negative sixth density energy fields to perfectly match some highly positive sixth density wanderers. It hints at maybe a slight imbalance towards the positive at those very high levels.
Fascinating possibility. Okay, question 11, 68.11. This brings us back to wanderers beings like Carla, who chose to incarnate here to help, and their vulnerability during trance. The hypothesis is they lack full magical defense when out of body.
And Ra confirms this is generally correct, especially, they say, for wanderers who haven't consciously undertaken specific magical training within their current third density lifetime.
So their innate abilities might be harder to access or control consciously when they're disassociated from the physical body and its trained responses.
That seems to be the implication. Conscious intent and energetic manipulation might be trickier without that physical anchor and the practice developed within this life's context. Ra also adds that it's extremely rare for any third density entity to have that level of conscious magical defense capability while in trance.
Which really highlights the risk involved in these states, especially without proper grounding or protection.
Absolutely. It underscores the inherent vulnerability for most of us when exploring beyond ordinary consciousness without, specific preparation or guidance. Which, naturally, leads Dawn in question 12, 68.12, to basically ask, okay, given this danger, can you teach us magical defense?
A very understandable question after hearing all that. But Ra again invokes the first distortion. They say that request goes beyond what they can offer directly.
Why? Can't they just teach techniques?
Ra explains that true magical ability isn't just about techniques you learn like a recipe. It has to be sought in a specific way, primarily through the deep internal work of balancing the self. They say they have offered general instructions for this, already achieving inner harmony, self-acceptance, integrating all aspects of the self.
So the protection comes from the inside out, essentially, from being balanced.
That's the core of it. And Ra gives a strong warning about the danger of giving potent magical knowledge or power to someone who isn't internally prepared, who hasn't done that balancing work. It could be harmful.
Right, power without responsibility or grounding. Precisely. And linked to this, Ra gives a very direct, strong suggestion. The instrument, Carla, should never attempt to call upon Ra without the specific protective configuration they'd established with the group, the circle, the aligned members, the specific rituals.
That emphasizes how crucial those protective measures were.
Absolutely. It wasn't just symbolic, it was energetically necessary, especially given the instrument state and the nature of the contact.
Okay. Then questions 13 and 14, 68.13 and 14, take a bit of a turn. They ask about a book called Esmeralda Sweetwater that Jim McCarty and John Elkins had written. They want to know its significance.
Yeah, it's an interesting interlude. It shows how other creative works were intertwined with this group's spiritual journey. Ra confirms they can speak on it after scanning the group members involved.
And what do they say?
Ra explains that the commitment made between Jim and Dawn to work together for planetary service activated something powerful, a possibility-probability vortex. This vortex influenced the creation of the book.
How so?
The experience of writing it, or parts of it, was described as unusual. Like they were watching it unfold, almost like a movie, where past, present, and future merged into the now.
Wow, like tapping into a different stream of time?
It sounds like it. A state of heightened awareness, perhaps facilitated by that vortex of shared intention. Interestingly, though, Ra notes the ending of the book was problematic and had to be consciously authored, not just visualized.
Why?
Free will again. The future isn't entirely fixed, so the ending couldn't just be seen. It had to be chosen and created by the authors.
Fascinating. And the content of the book itself.
Ra says it contains both symbolic and specific views of significant events, perceived through the lens of that heightened awareness brought on by their commitment and, significantly, the restoration of full memory of their pre-incarnative dedication to their mission.
So the book was like a reflection or an outflowing of their reawakened purpose.
That's how it seems. It shows you how deep commitment to service can unlock creative channels and access deeper layers of memory and understanding, informing even artistic expression.
A beautiful connection between service and creativity. Okay, question 15, 68.15 brings us back to the Orion entity. Dawn wants to be sure it's okay to investigate the techniques of these negative entities more fully.
And Ra confirms, yes, understanding the methods is within the bounds of free will. Gaining knowledge about how things work, even negative processes, doesn't violate anyone's choice. In fact, it can empower you to make more informed choices.
Right? Knowledge is power, or at least potential protection. So that leads to the big one. Question 16, 68.16. Gon asks for a step-by-step breakdown of how that fifth density negative entity operated, right from when it first noticed the group.
Yes, and Ra gives a very detailed and quite insightful explanation here. It's like a playbook for negative strategy, operating within the Law of One framework.
Okay, walk us through it.
Step 1. The negative entity becomes aware of a source of significant positive power. The group's work, their harmony, their potential to energize others towards positive harvest, graduation to the next density.
So they sense the light, basically.
Exactly. Step 2. They desire to disable this positive source because it works against their goal of negative harvest, ensnaring souls for their path.
Makes sense from their perspective.
Step 3. Initially, they send lower-level negative entities, their legions. Ross Rawls calls them to offer temptations, distractions, try to sow discord within the group, things designed to pull them off their path of service.
And in this case?
Those attempts were ignored or ineffective. The group maintained its harmony and focus on service.
Good for them. So step 4.
The positive power source persists, even strengthens. So the main fifth density entity decides it needs to intervene more directly via energetic projection.
Bringing out the bigger guns.
Right. Step 5. The entity assesses the situation. It's still bound by the first distortion. It cannot directly violate free will, but it looks for existing distortions or weaknesses it can exploit.
Like what?
Ra mentions Carla's pre-incarnative choices or vulnerabilities regarding her physical body as one potential area. Another is any distortion within any group member that pulls them away from pure service to others orientation. Any selfishness, fear, doubt, these create tiny cracks the negative entity can potentially widen.
So they look for weak points in the armor.
Exactly. And then comes the really crucial part Ra explains. When Carla left her body freely during that spontaneous trance, the Orion entity saw an opportunity. If it could entice her mind-body-spirit complex to follow it freely, even through deception or confusion.
Then taking it wouldn't technically be a violation of her free will because she chose to follow.
Precisely. That's the loophole they look for. It's a manipulation of free will using confusion or exploiting vulnerability, but technically adhering to the letter of the law, you might say.
That is incredibly subtle and manipulative.
It is. Ray then acknowledges the group's desire to be, completely invulnerable to this, but they gently remind them that achieving that level of magical defense is a matter of their free choice, requiring them to actively engage with the principles of balancing and conscious energy work ideally, Ray suggests, again, as a unified group effort.
It always comes back to the inner work and the group harmony.
It really does. So, question 17, 68.17, drills down on that key point. Why would a positive person freely follow a negative entity, even if confused? How does that work with free will?
Yeah, that seems contradictory.
Ray's answer is incredibly concise and profound, they say. The positive polarity sees love in all things. The negative polarity is clever.
Wow. Okay, unpack that.
It suggests that the very nature of positive orientation, its tendency to seek connection, to see potential good, to offer understanding even to negativity, can sometimes make it vulnerable to deception by an entity that is intelligent, focused, and skilled at manipulation. The positive entity might misinterpret the negative's intention, seeing a distorted call for love instead of a lure.
So positivity's openness can be exploited by negativity's cunning.
That seems to be the essence of it. It's a stark reminder that discernment is crucial, even alongside compassion.
Absolutely. Okay, almost done. Question 18, 68.18. Dawn posits that a negative entity would actually lose power if it didn't use the free will of the target, if it just forced things.
And Rod confirms this is correct. This reinforces that the negative path, paradoxically, depends on manipulating free will. True, forceful violation actually diminishes their own energetic coherence or power within the structure of the laws of creation, as Ra describes them.
Interesting. So they need that element of choice, however manipulated.
It appears so. At this point, Ra also notes the transferred energy is running low, signaling the session needs to close soon, and asks if there are any brief final queries.
And Dawn asks one last one, 68.19, just checking if there's anything more they can do to improve Carla's comfort or the contact itself.
It shows their ongoing care, doesn't it? Ray acknowledges their conscientiousness, says the queries they've asked were necessary, and basically reassures them that despite the intensity, all is well.
And then comes the closing.
Yes, the beautiful standard closing. We thank you and leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite creator, Adonai.
What a session. 68 really takes you on a ride, doesn't it? From the instrument's physical vulnerability, through the mechanics of energy transfer, the near miss with the Orion entity, the nature of negative tactics, and always back to free will.
It's incredibly dense. The trance incident is such a powerful case study. It really hammers home the potential vulnerabilities in altered states, but also the power of group support and higher density protection like Latwe provided.
And that explanation of how negativity works within free will by exploiting distortions or using cleverness,
Sure.
that's a major insight for you, the listener, to ponder.
Absolutely. For me, the big takeaways for you listening are really about that energetic exchange, how service manifests, how vulnerability exists, and understanding the strategies of negativity aren't about brute force, but subtle manipulation of choice. And maybe most importantly, the immense power of your own intention, even a fleeting thought, and the need for conscious awareness.
It really drives home that this path requires, well, both heart and a discerning mind, doesn't it? A balance between openness and awareness.
Perfectly put. Service and growth need that grounded discernment alongside the loving intention.
So, for you listening, as you digest all this from session 68, maybe reflect on those moments when your own consciousness feels shifted, whether in meditation, dreams, or just quiet moments. What does this session tell you about navigating those spaces, about the power held within your focus? And here's a final thought to leave you with. RAF repeatedly emphasizes group work for magical protection and balancing. Why might collective, unified intention be so much more potent or safe than individual effort alone when dealing with these kinds of energies? Something to consider. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and in the peace of the one infinite creator.
Namaste. I am you, and you are me.